John, this is by far my favorite interview that we've done so far. I thought it was really good. David is such a great guy, really interesting to talk to, really, I think, just channels the spirit of being from West Virginia and of being from Appalachia in this interview, and it really shows.
Yeah, it does, Chuck. It definitely shows when we tell you that this guy is a super nice guy and super humble. I mean, we mean it. We wouldn't blow smoke up your ass, I promise. This guy deserves your support, and I hope he wins it over by, you listening to this interview and going to listen to his music, because I think you'll like it.
Absolutely. Well, and without further ado, we'll get to our interview. David Morris, he's an American singer-songwriter from Charleston, West Virginia. His latest EP, Small Town Friday Night, is available now on iTunes and other streaming platforms.
So young, so lost, trying to get by. Couldn't tell us nothing, we had too much pride. Spending all weekends working part-time. We were just trying to survive.
David, we really appreciate you coming on. I know that for both Chuck and I, we've listened to your stuff for a long time. I mean, going back to even like the DY days. So we have kind of been along for most of your musical career. So we really do appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate you guys having me. I appreciate it. To be honest, I do get a lot of requests of people wanting to interview me for podcasts or YouTube or blogs and stuff. And I typically, I just kind of, I shy away from it just because there's only so many interviews you can do, and they're typically all the same. And I just feel like when you guys reached out and I looked into the podcast and I saw what you guys were doing and how you were doing it, I was just like, this is cool, man. This is very on brand. This is very cool, and something that I want to be a part of, because, not only do you guys talk about the people that you're interviewing, but also about West Virginia and about Appalachia and about that culture. And so that's what really interested in me in connecting with you guys today.
Well, we really appreciate that. And Chuck and I were actually talking a little bit earlier that you really don't do a ton of interviews. I mean, from what we've found, I mean, there's not a ton. You're a pretty exclusive guy.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not because I'm trying to be mysterious,
right.
But again, it's just because a lot of interviews that you're going to have, it's going to be the same exact questions, the same thing, the same topic. And so I connect with my fans so directly on a regular basis, and I'm a pretty open book that I just feel like in this stage of where I'm at, I can be selective. Down the line, obviously, if like a big publication were to reach out or a big podcast or something, I'm obviously going to do it because it's great exposure. But it's more so now where I am in my career about wanting to do it strategically. And that's why, I think it's cool what you guys do. I listen to a lot of podcasts, especially on Apple's podcast app. And so just to see what you guys are doing and how you're doing it, I thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of to give the fans, something to come and listen to and check out.
Well, we appreciate that. I'll jump right into it. So for this interview, I think our goal for this is to introduce you to maybe some people who don't know who you are. If there's still people out there, I'm not sure if you live in Appalachia, how you haven't heard of David Morris, but if you haven't, we've got a treat for you. I'd like to introduce you to some of the people who may not know you, but also, talk to you about the region, what brings you back, the state of West Virginia. I mean, we'll jump into everything.
Awesome.
All right, perfect. So when people think of David Morris, what should they think about?
That's a great question. I would hope that they would think about, especially in Appalachia, about their childhood, their upbringing. I think that a lot of this new music that I've been making as David Morris is rooted in that. I took some time. You guys have been listening. For those who may not know, I used to release music and my artist name was DY. And I'm from Charleston, West Virginia. And so I grew up there. And I think for a long time, I kind of ran away from my roots. I moved away from West Virginia the second that I could. The second I graduated from WVU, I moved to New York. I got as far away as possible. I moved to Los Angeles, California. And for a while, I was making more hip hop and rap music, and I was really running away from the country roots in West Virginia. Because when you're a kid growing up in West Virginia or in a small town anywhere, it's not cool. It's the last thing you want. You want to get out. You want to leave. That's just part of everyone's journey. And I think that is what I'm trying to get across in this music is that, the story of me being from West Virginia, being from Charleston, which if you've never been to Charleston, I don't know if it's technically defined as a small town, but if you're from Charleston, you grew up in a small town. And so when people think of David Morris, they should think about their upbringing, their childhood, their journey, their life, their story in Appalachia, wherever that may be, because I think that's my number one goal in the music is just to tell these stories from my perspective that hopefully resonate with people.
That's a perfect way to start this. I love that story because it's something that I think I can say resonates with me, and I'm sure resonates with a lot of people that listen to this, for people especially that moved away from West Virginia and from Appalachia. And it was actually something that I wanted to ask you about. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because when I was growing up, it was very much the same thing for myself and a lot of my friends. We wanted, as soon as we could, to get out, to go somewhere else and get away from where we grew up. And I'm kind of interested in what your perspective is, because it wasn't until I moved away from West Virginia that I really started to reflect on where I grew up and realized how important and how unique it was and how unique it made me. And I'm kind of wondering when maybe you had that realization, or if you had a similar realization when you moved away.
Yeah, I think that the realization is an ongoing one. I think that when, as a teenager, I wanted nothing to do with West Virginia. I wanted to get away and never come back. Obviously, I want to see my family, but, in a bigger sense, I wanted to never come back. And the older I get now, the more appealing settling down and starting a family in West Virginia would be. Not sure that I'm going to do it, but just really soaking in, being in places. Now I live in Los Angeles and Nashville, so I'm basically splitting time between both places. Aside from our current quarantine situation. But I'm typically between both of these big cities. And, the more time I spend there and the more time I spend going, across the country when I'm touring and I'm traveling, the more appealing West Virginia life is. And it's a simple life. It's an inexpensive one compared to, I could get, and this is no joke, guys, I could get 400 acres in West Virginia, 3-bedroom, 2,500 square foot house, all the above in West Virginia for the price that I could get a regular 1,500 square foot house with no yard, no privacy at all in California or Nashville. And so it's just, there's so many things that as you get older, you realize that West Virginia is appealing in those more tangible senses of finances and things like that. And then the more you understand how appealing West Virginia is in a sense of community and family and a sense of belonging, right? Like in a big city, you're one of millions of people, but when you're in a small town or you're in Appalachia, West Virginia, there's a sense of belonging. Everyone knows you, everyone looks out for each other. Everyone is much nicer and kinder. And so I feel that it's just an ongoing realization as you grow up, you understand more maybe why you have the perspective you do and maybe why your parents you chose to settle down or raise you in West Virginia. And so I think that's really where it's at. And, every state, every place has their struggles, their problems, whether it's a socioeconomic thing, whether it's a cultural thing or whatever, but you start to really, as you get older, I think, understand, what makes a place like West Virginia special and what it was about that place that made you special. And so I think that's really where it's at for me.
One thing I was interested in, and aside from like your music, which I think is a way that you communicate about where you're from in a different way. But like when people find out that you're from West Virginia, when you tell them you're from West Virginia in a place like California, how do you explain to people where you're from?
That's a funny question. There's three basic reactions I get. The first being, whoa, really? I've never met anyone from West Virginia. Two is, and I know you guys have both got it, and a lot of the listeners right now have got this too, which is maybe the most common response I get, which is, "Oh, that's really cool. I have some friends in Richmond," and
Sounds familiar.
I'm like, it's a different state. And then the third most common response I've gotten throughout history, which was much more in high school and college and those days, is people, they have stereotypes about West Virginia about rednecks and hillbillies and incest and things like that, and they're like, "Oh, West Virginia, do you kiss your cousin?" and all this stuff, and just kind of poke fun at it, because I think that a lot of people, if they know West Virginia and where it is and that it's its own state, I think that there's a lot of just misconceptions and stereotypes about it, and so have definitely gotten that a lot. And I don't sound very country in the way I talk, but yet people obviously just instantly assume things about you when you're from West Virginia, that you're, a redneck or this or that. So, yeah. But genuinely speaking, when people now say, when I say I'm from West Virginia, people are just like, "Oh, that's cool." And I think it's one of those things where when you meet somebody from a state, like you meet somebody from Alaska, you're like, "Oh, wow, what's it like there?" Like, no way. Like, I've never met anybody from there. And so I get a lot of questions now about West Virginia, about like, "Oh, John Denver, like I love country roads," or like, "Oh, I've driven through there. It's such a beautiful state." But I think that's probably more so just a thing that you get as an adult. When you're younger, it's a little harder to kind of explain West Virginia to people because of the jokes and whatnot that you might have. But it's always interesting conversation for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Chuck and I can definitely relate. I'm in full agreement with this top three. I think that you're spot on there. I don't want to harp too much on any of your past career. I want to focus mostly on the current and your feelings towards the region. But I do have to ask, so that your transition from DY to David Morris, and you've kind of hinted at this a little bit in terms of kind of reconnecting with the region and reconnecting with maybe who you are. What brought that transition about? And I mean, was there like a moment where you were like, "I have to change it up," or what was it that really made you think, "I want to be David Morris now"?
Right. So good question, John. So we'll go back for the people who are listening who may not know who I am or anything about me. So anyways, just a little kind of expedited history lesson. So I grew up in Charleston, went to George Washington High School, graduated from West Virginia University, and during my time there, I started releasing music as DY was my artist name, and had a pretty successful career as an independent artist. Was just in charge of everything that you can be in charge of as an artist, a lot of freedom, and was able to build a fan base. The music was mostly hip hop, rap, some braggadocio lines, some entertaining stuff. But it got to a point where I was being grouped in with a certain subset of artists that I wasn't really comfortable with. I was always playing guitar, writing songs, and wanting to kind of do more. So it came to a point, maybe 2016, 2015, where I took about a year and a half off from releasing music. And I just realized, like, hey, I'm David Morris. That's my name. I'm going to stop hiding behind a moniker. And I'm going to figure out what makes me me. So I think as an artist, I think, you have to have a story to tell. And there are so many artists that just make music, and that's fine. But the artists that I love have always been the storytellers, the ones that bring you into a world. And so it's just been a natural evolution for me to figure out, well, I'm a kid from West Virginia. I grew up writing graffiti, skateboarding, listening to all sorts of music from Johnny Cash and Simon and Garfunkel to Tupac to Eminem. And I have a deep respect for all these genres of music. And I understand what it was like to grow up in a place, to want to get out, to have seen a lot of unfortunate things happen to friends and to the state itself. And I just really started to carve out the picture of who I am. And I wanted to reflect that in the music. And so that's been the journey. And that's what I'm continuing to do with this music. So, you know, you have songs like This Town that I've released, or Where the Back Road Ends, that are more kind of emotional and kind of more lyric driven in a storytelling sense. And then even in like the rap songs that I've been releasing with F350 and Live from the Heartland, when you break down the lyrics of that same story and that same DNA is there. Really just painting this picture of who I am and what my story is. And so I think that's really been it. It's just been a journey, and it's been a conscious decision to say, hey, I'm old enough now to realize what I've been running from for so long is what has made me so special, and really just reconnecting with my roots in Appalachia, in West Virginia, and my upbringing. I think that is really what's going to help me have a career and continue to have a career. And so it's just kind of, it's been an evolution, you know, and I think that we all evolve as people. I think that in reality, if you're not growing as a person, if you're not growing as an artist, if you're not growing as a podcaster, whatever it may be, I think that you probably are selling yourself a little short. And so that's what the journey's been like for me. And that's kind of the attitude that I have going forward as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great explanation. I remember listening to your earlier stuff, and then the big one that hit me that I thought that I think I started to notice a change in at least the way it was before the whole transition, but when you released Young Love, Hated and Broke, I think that was in like 2013. I remember buying the EP, and that song is when I started to kind of notice that it was it was a little different than some of your older stuff, and then I mean, fast forward 3-4 years, you know, David Morris is now front and center and really releasing songs that you can tell are kind of far more near and dear to your heart. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, it absolutely is. There's just a different hunger inside me that's driving me now. It's just I just feel like I have a message. I have something to say finally. And I've just, every song that I release, I just get more feedback from fans and from new listeners, and it just motivates me more, and it just shows me that, like, hey, you're on the right track, you have a story to tell. And you know, just like you guys, like, there are so many people. I mean, most people in America grow up in a small town or a rural area or a non, urban area, in a sense of, there is that understanding of what it's like to grow up, to want to get out and to see stuff. And I just think it's cool because it's so easy to just like make music, right? It's so easy to just make a podcast or it's so easy to just do whatever. But what is harder to do and what is more fulfilling is to do something that means something, that elicits something from yourself and from a listener. And so that's where I'm at, is I always want to just stay true to myself, stay true to my roots, and tell a story that I hope people can relate to, and that's what I think is cool about this podcast, is like everyone listening right now obviously has some sort of roots or interest in Appalachia. And, that's why it means more than just another podcast where they're just like interviewing random people.
Well, we appreciate that. And I want to, for our listeners who may not know David, I want to point out too that although he's being kind of humble about this transition, DY was in terms of rap, was very well known. I mean, when you walked away from that, essentially you were walking away. I mean, I've checked some of the streams. I mean, you have you have millions of streams as DY. I mean, it's not like no one knew who you were at that point. And then, you know, you must,
right.
I fully agree. When you made this transition, you definitely were true to yourself. And I mean, to be able to do that, I'm not sure if I'd be able to do that. So I respect the hell out of you for being like, look, that doesn't matter. What really matters is how I feel.
Yeah. And you know, it wasn't something where like, I felt like I was walking off the deep end into the great unknown abyss. It was like, it was really just at a point where like I was releasing music and I had all this music that I wanted to release and it just didn't fit. It just wasn't, there was a disconnect. And so I took some time and I was just like, I got to a point where I was just like comfortable with not releasing music because I knew there was a bigger picture there. And so, you know, it's great. People are still listening to the DY stuff. I still make money off of that. So that's a nice bonus. But like, you know, there definitely was a point where, you know, if you had said, hey, you have to walk away from this, delete every song ever, erase the memory of DY, would you do it? And I would have said, yeah, just because I believe so much in myself and my talent and what I'm doing that, you know, I would have been willing to put on the line. So now it's kind of cool because it's the best of both worlds. People are going back. They're discovering the DY stuff. People who are fans like yourself from back in the day are still listening in and appreciating it. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, really.
Yeah. And that's the last question I'll ask about the past. Now let's fast forward to, you know, today and really 2019, 2020. You released Small Town Friday Night, that album, which that's that EP. That was really where we see more of this like Appalachian feel and really you getting down to your roots. And one song in particular that you've mentioned already, which I think I would argue to the end of time that it is like a Appalachian anthem, and that's This Town.
Thank you.
Tell us about that song. What brought it about and what made you want to release it?
Well, it's a great question. So the way that song came about was a lot of times when I'll be writing a song and it comes about in a few different ways. With that particular one, I was sitting at my dad's house in Charleston, and I was sitting at the kitchen table. My brother was there, so we were probably in town for a holiday or something. And I was sitting there and I had my MacBook and I had Fruity Loops, which I use Fruity Loops. I use Logic, Pro Tools, depending on what we're going for. And I remember I just put in some MIDI keys, like some chords, and it had a vibe to it. And I just started singing over top of it. And the first thing that came out was something about this town. And I kind of had the verse melody, and I think I might have like freestyled the opening lines. Like it just came to me. And so it took some time. I kind of picked up the guitar and then messed with it on there. And then I just slowly started building the track. So This Town is the only song on that EP that I actually produced myself. A lot of the other ones I have other producers, you know, build out tracks or collaborate. But that one, it just one that came to me was real special. I remember once I added some drums in and I got kind of the hook idea, I was like, man, there's something special here. And I just took a couple of days to kind of refine the lyrics and to add stuff. I added the acoustic guitars, and then I had a buddy of mine come over and I was hearing a guitar solo and I had him play it. And so, so it was one of these things where it just kind of happened. You know, a lot of times I'll have preconceived like concepts, like I want to write a song titled Boom, or I want to write a song about this. But in this circumstance, it was really just something that came to life, and I'm glad it did, because if you guys who haven't heard it, you guys can look up David Morris, This Town. I'd recommend going to YouTube because there's a music video that accompanies it. That's really special. It's definitely a song that I think perfectly encapsulates where I want the music to go. So sometimes we might have stuff that's more hip hop, or we might have stuff that's more country or folk. But I think This Town is the perfect balance of kind of both of those worlds, where there's a real story and a real message, while also having a little modern production in there as well.
And speaking of that music video, you filmed that in Charleston. Is that right? In West Virginia?
Yeah, so it was all filmed in southern West Virginia, filmed between really two locations, one Charleston and two down in Wharton, which is in Boone County, down in Van and Wharton.
Oh, yeah.
Are two of those, yeah. So that's where my dad works. My dad works at a nonprofit clinic down there. He's a doctor. And so he is just really in touch with the community there. And every time I go down there, it's always love and people always, are just showing love to me and to my dad. And so I wanted to really not only tell my story of growing up in Charleston, but tell the story of these communities and these people in Appalachia that I think is so important to tell, because I think that I feel like the spotlight is shined on those communities for the wrong reasons. And so I wanted to shine it for the right reasons.
That's why we created this podcast. In all honesty, I think we all have the same mission here, and that's the point being that Appalachia is more than what people perceive it as. And I think that's why artists like you pushing it forward and being front and center and saying, I'm not afraid to be Appalachian, I'm not afraid to be West Virginian, is a big deal. And that's one reason we really wanted you to come on and to discuss these feelings. And I think to transition just a little bit more in terms of just the region itself, when you come back, I know that you said you live in LA and Nashville, and when you come back to West Virginia, I mean, what brings you back? I mean, you have all the opportunity in the world in terms of those two cities, especially with the type of music that you make. What drives you back here?
Well, I mean, number one, of course, is family, right? My dad and my stepmom live in Charleston still. I have good friends that still live there. So that's obviously going to be number one. But number two would be, it's just a nice escape. It's a nice escape from the big city and the fast-paced industry and all that stuff that you experience in LA and Nashville. And so when I go back, I not only get to see my family, but I get to just take a breather. And there's so much inspiration in being back in Charleston and driving around and reminiscing on things and putting things into perspective. And I think that's so important when you're an artist, right? Is putting things into perspective and being able to have that time to reflect and to just, look back. And I think that every time I go back, I'm inspired in a new way. So
that's a great reason to go back, and I think that's certainly one of the reasons why I go back is family and just really wanting to reconnect with where I'm from. One thing that you mentioned earlier was shining a light on the good parts of Appalachia and the good parts of West Virginia especially. And you mentioned your dad being a doctor. Were there people, it could be your parents, but other people growing up that kind of served as that inspiration of someone that you could shine a good light on, and people doing that good type of work that served as an inspiration for you?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. My whole family are all in medicine in one way or another. So my dad's a physician. Like I said, he works he actually works at two clinics. He works for a nonprofit company that has a clinic in Wharton, West Virginia, and one in Whitesville. So he's, depending on the day of the week, he's in one of those places, which some of you listening might know where those are, but they're very rural parts of West Virginia. My grandfather, may he rest in peace, was a dentist who was also in the military. My mom, now retired, was a nurse. My aunts and uncles were dentists. And so it's just one of those things where I grew up and I saw how they dedicated their lives to helping others, and so I always thought that was great. There was a point in time where I thought, maybe I should be a doctor, and music kind of was the path that, was calling my name. And now I think it's cool because they support my musical career, and have always been championing me and very excited for me, and that, especially now when there is a real tangible effect and people are reaching out all the time sending me messages and comments and just telling me that the music is helping them. In a way, I'm able to kind of follow in their footsteps of helping people. And it's nowhere, I'm not equating me being an artist to like being a doctor. I'm just saying that, all I wanted to do my whole life was have a positive impact on people like my dad and like my mom and stuff. And I feel like now I am able to have that impact. And I have super respect for people, right now, especially who are on the front lines in medicine and the military and stuff, because I grew up with just a deep respect for service. And so I think that, if I can help to shine a light on those people and that sort of sentiment, I think that's kind of the best of both worlds for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as an aside, I hope that your family, especially your dad and all the other folks in your family in the medical field, are staying safe during this crazy time.
They are, yes.
Good to know, good to hear, and I hope they continue to. I was really curious to ask you about the reception to your music from people in West Virginia, people you grew up with.
I think that with this new music, with the David Morris music, I've seen a definitive increase in people from West Virginia. I think that since I've tapped back into my roots and released songs like Settle Down and This Town and Where the Back Road Ends, I've seen so many people from all over West Virginia show me love and extend an olive branch of support. And, I'm humbled by it. I think it's great. And what's cool is I think that, I think a lot of music from Appalachia, from West Virginia, from country areas and small towns, it's pretty much folk or Americana music, or it's just straight country music. And I think what's cool, what my intention is, and what I think that I'm doing successfully is I'm blending the genres, and I'm giving people, or even like when I do a rap song, like Live from the Heartland, it's blatantly a rap song, but what I'm talking about is this Appalachia small town vibes and upbringing. And as a fan of music, right, like there's none. I would say there may be a very, very small niche group of artists that even try to do anything like that. And so if I was a kid growing up, right, like kids nowadays in 2020 listen to everything, right? Like the same kid that's a fan of Luke Bryan is a fan of Post Malone, who's also a fan of Drake. And so, that's how I've always been. And I think it's more prevalent now. But I think those kids, like, if I was a kid and I was interested in all this, and here's an artist who's singing sometimes, who's rapping sometimes, and who's telling a story that's relatable to me, like I'd be into it. And so I think that's what I'm seeing, right? Because I'm having a lot of kids who are 14, 15, 16-year-old high school kids hitting me up. Yo, dude, can I use your song as my walkout song for baseball? It's my senior year. And I'm like, dude, of course, sure. And then I'm having 55-year-old women hitting me up and saying, thank you so much for Where the Back Road Ends. I lost my husband. And it's like, and that song resonates with me, and it's just really powerful. And so again, I've been making music for a long time. I've seen, like John referenced, I've seen some success, but there's nothing as fulfilling as seeing people from West Virginia, from Kansas, from Idaho, from places that are similar to where I grew up, telling me that they relate to it. Because I think that as an artist, that's the highest honor, right? It's like, it's not the hardest thing to do to make money as an artist if you're successful. It's not the hardest thing to do to travel and tour and see places and cool things and yada, yada, yada. But what I think is hard is really, really connecting with people on a cellular level to where you're getting these messages from them that are heartfelt. And that's what keeps me going. And I think that's been the number one thing that I've seen from a reception point of view from people from West Virginia. Is just like, hey, dude, I relate to this. Thank you. And then I always say, dude, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And I'm always working on more stuff and just wanting to consistently give people, something to listen to.
Yeah, and I've got to say, you are probably I would say by far one of the bigger artists who are actually willing to talk and communicate with their fans. I mean, I've DM'd you before and just, talked to you about random stuff, and you've always answered. You've always been really cool about everything. And even though I think This Town is your best song for Appalachia, I don't think it's your most relatable. I actually think your most relatable song is what you've been hinting at, is Where the Back Road Ends. And in that song, I mean, it's a super powerful song. So if you haven't listened to it, go to his Spotify and check it out, because I guarantee you that you'll be able to relate to it. But in that song and in that video, you include an in memoriam section at the very end, which, little fact, actually has my wife's grandma's name in it. So I sincerely appreciate you doing that, because when you released that, that was on like May 26th, and I didn't tell my wife about it because her birthday was the next day. So I got to give her a pretty cool birthday present, and she loves your music. So it's really neat to see that. What made you
That's awesome.
want to do that? I mean, that's a pretty special thing to do. Where does that come from?
So just to give people more perspective on it, the song is called Where the Back Road Ends. It's a song about loss, about love, about life, about missing people. And I wrote the song after one of my best friends, who was like a little brother to me, Adam, who I grew up with. He passed away in December 2018 after a lifelong battle with cystic fibrosis. And so he is just the latest in a string of friends that I've lost prematurely due to various reasons. And when I heard a buddy of mine send me the instrumental, a producer, he was like, "What do you think about this?" And I listened to it and I started writing, and it's as I finished the song, I knew that there needed to be a video for it. And as we finished the video, I knew that people were going to relate to it. And I knew that although the song had personal meaning to me, I knew that it was going to touch other people, and that other people were going to be able to relate to it. So, it was right around, I think, the day that I found out that, Kobe had passed away. And that was a rough day for, I think, a lot of people, because we grew up with Kobe Bryant, and, always definitely a hero of mine, and someone that I look up to, and always watched his games and stuff. And I saw a video of like highlights of him. And at the end, there was like credits flashed of like, rest in peace to like the people who passed away in that accident. And I just thought, you know what, I should do this in my video. I should give fans and give people an opportunity to memorialize and honor their loved ones. And so I just put out a video on my social media and was just like, "Hey guys, the next song I'm releasing has a video. It's about people who are no longer here with us. I would love to honor, anyone that you've lost. So send me a message or a comment with the names of these people." And I got over 300 and some names. And at the end of the video, the in memoriam section says "in loving memory of," and then these names start to scroll. And it's a pretty powerful, slow, and painful 2 minutes or so of just these names just scrolling and scrolling. And it is really cool, for you to be able to see your wife's grandma. And I'm really happy that I was able to do that for her. But it does put things into perspective, and it is a little, painful to just see those names and just realize how many people, I mean, in reality, all of us have lost someone, right? I mean, I guess as adults, I guess, for sure, depending on how old your listeners are. But, and I just think that that's something that connects all of us, right? Is that we've all lost somebody. We've all gone through hardships and hard times. And the motivation for it was just really like, let me see if there's a way that I can help better connect, people. And I'm glad that it worked out. I'm glad that people were able to have the names of their loved ones in there. And I'm just honored that I was able to do that. That
was such a neat idea. And it was, I think, so powerful for so many people, and really in my opinion, cuts at the heart of what it means to be from Appalachia and really show that kind of respect. As I typically do, I get a little introspective. Being from West Virginia and having left, I take a lot of the lessons that I learned growing up there with me. And for John and I both, being from West Virginia has influenced us so much. I'm wondering, what's the most important thing from growing up in West Virginia that you take with you today and that influences you today? And just to give you an example, for me, it's appreciating hard work from others. My dad was a union steel worker who worked his fingers to the bone every single day. My mom put herself through community college to help make the family more money when my dad was on strike. And like seeing that level of work ethic driven by love that really inspires me even to this day. And so I'm wondering, like, what's that takeaway for you from where you grew up that you keep with you today?
It's a great question. And I think that the answer to that question for me has only come in recent years, you know, since I've gone through this journey musically, and since I've been able to look back. And it's really appreciating the simple things in life. And you realize that, like, you have these big goals and dreams, and they're important, right? You need to work towards your goals and dreams. But what typically with most people, especially artists, right? It's a money thing or a status thing of platinum plaques or hit records or money. And then you get so caught up in achieving whatever this is, or aiming for it and working towards it, that you realize that, like, what is at the end of it, right? And at the end of it, all you can really ask for most people, for me at least, is like, I want a family, I want to settle down, I want to raise them, I want to, you know, in a bigger picture, in a bigger sense of things. So it comes to where you realize, like, oh man, like, none of this shit actually matters. Like, what really actually matters is the things that you saw growing up, is community, is family, is, you know, people appreciating the simple things in life. In a new song that I've been working on recently, I said, it goes, shout out to my country folk, the working class, the little guy. Some of us don't want to be famous. We want a simple life, a healthy and a happy family. We just want to get it right. A house and a steady job and a cold beer on a Friday night. And it goes on. It's like a 4-minute song of me just kind of talking about these sort of things, kind of answering this question. And it's really that, like, look, like, as much as, you know, people in Los Angeles have this bubble around them and they want to be famous, they want to be influencers, they want to be this, like, a majority of people, on top of a majority of people, once an artist or once a celebrity or once an influencer gets all this cool stuff they want, they join this majority of people who realize that the important things in life are family, are friendship, are having a house, owning your own property or whatever it may be. And it's the simple things. And I think that that's what's been most important to me, is like, I feel like my perspective on West Virginia and Appalachia has helped me to realize that, like, hey, don't focus on the wrong things. Don't focus on the money. Don't focus on the success. Don't focus on the fame. Focus on the journey. Focus on the story. Make sure that in the midst of aiming for these goals, that you're not losing track of who you are and where you're from. And so that's where I am now, where I'm understanding that I'm already so blessed. Having a family, having an amazing relationship with my family, having an amazing girlfriend, having an amazing support group of friends, and being from a place where, you know, I can still go back and still get perspective on things. And I think that that's what I was getting caught up with for a while, being in New York and being in LA and being in Nashville. Is like, you know, this music industry stuff is pretty crazy. But just realizing, like, there's more than that. And those sort of things aren't stuff that money or success can buy, right? You grew up with it in West Virginia. You grew up with it in Appalachia. When you thought you had nothing, you actually had all that you needed. And so I think that is the biggest takeaway.
I think that's very well said. I mean, Chuck and I can tend to have a commonality with you there. Both Chuck and I went to law school, and at the end of it thought, man, I don't want to be an attorney. So I mean, we rather do something else and help people and really kind of turn down some of the things that maybe other people think we're crazy to do.
Exactly.
But we definitely agree with you. And it took me a long time to really come to grips with it being okay that I wanted a certain life. And so, I mean, I definitely can relate to you on that. And I could go all night long and ask you millions of questions because I've got plenty, but I got two more to wrap this up. I know that you're a busy guy, and we're very thankful that you did this interview. In terms of this region and really, I mean, the country as a whole, I think that we're kind of boxing you in as an Appalachian artist, but honestly, most of your stuff is very relatable. And you're talking about your goals earlier. Yeah. You have all these goals. What is your goal now? Because I mean, your goals obviously have changed from 10 years ago. Where does David Morris want to be?
That's a great question, and I don't know if I would necessarily consider myself an Appalachian artist. I would consider myself an artist from Appalachia, for sure, an artist from Appalachia. I think that, but I think it's back to like, I am trying to tap into something where I'm using different genres of music to tell the story of West Virginia, of growing up in a small town, of growing up in Appalachia. So I think there is some cross-pollination there, but, I have a great love and respect for Mountain Stage and Appalachian music in its truest sense, bluegrass and folk and country and Americana. So I have a deep appreciation and respect, and I'm very tapped into all those artists as well. But your question, I think, was, what is my goal, right? What are my goals? My goal, where I want to be. That's a great question. So in a bigger sense, I just want my music to reach the largest audience possible. Right. And I think that artists are like, oh, I want fame, or I want money, or I want success, or I want status. And in reality, those are just a byproduct of your music being as accessible and as ubiquitous as possible. And so I think with every artist, you want to make music that the widest group of people can relate to. So that's really the thing, is just to continue to release music and grow the fan base. And I want to be back on the road touring and meeting people, because I take, like you referenced earlier, I respond to every fan. I try to respond to every message. I just want to get back on the road and meet people. So I would say just continue to grow the fan base and get back on the road. And then I think the next goal will be to, get it to where I can continue making the different genres of music that I want and have them be equally represented on different platforms and fan bases. Because like I have very, very country songs, very, very folk songs, very, very hip hop songs, which you guys, I think, know by having listened to my music. But I just want other people to know that I am a multi-dimensional artist, and I'm just trying to tell my story. So I think that, I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but I think that that's it. I don't think anybody can answer that question but you. So there was really no answer I was looking for. And when we first, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, I think a lot of artists would be like, okay, my goals, I want a number one hit single. I want money. I want this. And it's like, yeah, I've already established why those answers are problematic. It's like, hey man, I just want to continue to get my music to the people and get it to more people, and hopefully be able to relate, through this music. So,
well, when we first started this interview, I asked you, how would you describe David Morris? And to me, if somebody asks, or whenever they ask who you are, I always say range. I mean, the amount of stuff that you have. I mean, you've talked about it. You have rap. You have, kind of like this almost R&B sound. You have a country sound. You have, I mean, literally whatever music you're into, David's probably made it. And I think that is really impressive. And I'm not musically talented. I don't know much about music, and I'm not a music producer, but I am a betting man, and I would bet on David Morris. So I will say that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I could tell you that if you go on tour, I could name a few people who are definitely buying front row seats. So, we really appreciate everything that you're doing for the region. We appreciate you coming and interviewing with us. And just so everyone knows, how can they learn more about you and where can they listen to your music?
Right. So my music, you can listen to it on any platform, wherever you listen to music. Just type in David Morris. A good place to start would be maybe the most recent song I've released, which we discussed, called Where the Back Road Ends. So if you go on iTunes or Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube, SoundCloud, whatever it is, and you just type in David Morris, Where the Back Road Ends, that might be a good place to start. And then from there, you can just check out the other music that I have out. You can also tap in with me on Instagram, just at David Morris. It should be the first one that pops up there. Facebook and Twitter, I don't think are as kind of active and engaging as Instagram is currently. So I would say you could definitely check me out on those platforms. But to keep updated with everything I'm doing, I'd say Instagram might be the best move.
Well, we're definitely urging all of our listeners to go and check David Morris out. David, we, again, really appreciate it. When we first started this podcast and started to think about who we wanted on it, we had a little bit of a if we ever get big enough section, and you were in it. So we're really thankful that you were willing to come on. We're honored to have you, and we wish you nothing but success.
Chuck, John, I appreciate it. Likewise, if there are other people in that section that you haven't been able to get a hold of, let me know. Maybe I can connect the dots for you. I'll also brainstorm and see if maybe there are some other people that might be a good fit for this podcast, because I like what you guys are doing. I think it's important, and I wish you guys nothing but the best. And I'm excited to promote this episode to my fans and friends and have them come and check out what you guys have going on.